everybody. Welcome to Hey Coach Tony. I'm Tony Fiorino, and each week here on Hey Coach Tony, we're going to discuss the pressing issues in youth sports. And as always, I look forward to taking your calls. So if you want to chime in on anything we're discussing here in the studio, you can call us at 855-HEY-COACH. That's 855-439-2622. Now, I've been told this week that we have identified some of our phone hiccups. So listen up. If you call the studio today and the phone is ringing, guess what? That means we know you're there. So just be patient and stay on hold. Turns out we had some issues when someone was on the air with me and we tried to grab another call. Sometimes we would hang up on everybody. So I don't want to do that again. So please do call the studio at 855-HEY-COACH. And again, just be patient. I promise we're going to get to your calls. Okay, this week, two things in particular got my attention, and I'm hoping that we got time to hit both topics. First, in the small town of Melrose, Massachusetts, a group of athletes was caught participating in illegal activity. Now, specifically, these athletes were photographed using alcohol and or tobacco at a party, and the photographs, of course, were put up on Facebook and Twitter and anything else they could think of. Now, anyway, these athletes each received a suspension of up to 60% of their sports season. And by the way, all the photos have been turned over to the Melrose Police Department so that they can identify the houses where these parties took place. These houses are going to be identified, and something called the social host law is apparently going to be strictly enforced. And we'll talk about some of that a little bit later on because it seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, wouldn't you know it, there are still people arguing that even though each of these athletes and their parents signed a code of conduct outlining the potential punishment for this kind of activity, they're arguing that this punishment is, of course, now too harsh because it affects their own kids. Now, this, as you know, has always been a pet peeve of mine. And so later on in the show, I'm going to go through verbatim some of the responses, the ridiculous responses and opinions that came from some of the parents in the Melrose, Massachusetts area. But before we get to that, I happened to stumble across a story just after last week's show. And when I researched it, I just knew that I had to talk about it this week. About 2 years ago, Newburgh Free Academy of Newburgh, New York, defeated Niagara Falls High School in the boys' New York State Basketball Championship. Fact of the matter is, most of you don't know, remember, or maybe didn't even hear about this. Okay, but it's being brought back into the memories of a lot of the Niagara Falls players. You want to know why? Well, 2 years after the fact, the pain of that loss might be even more painful now because what's happened, several of the Newburgh players from that team have apparently admitted that they frequently were cutting classes and still played during their last two seasons, including that very championship game. Now, there's a lot more to this story, and so to discuss it, this week I called out to you all on email and asked you to nominate for me an athletics director. And to use the quote that I used on email, I wanted an athletics director who has a brain and a backbone to match, because I really don't want to dance around this. I want to strike right to the heart of the issue. And I can only do that with a no-nonsense AD who's been around and isn't afraid to attack issues like this. So after evaluating several individuals, I invited Mike King, who is the athletics director at West Hill High School in Stamford, Connecticut, to join me in the studio. I was told that Mike is my kind of guy, and so before we continue, I'd like to welcome Mike King to the show. Mike, welcome to Hey Coach Tony. How you doing this morning?
Great. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, the pleasure is certainly all mine. Mike, before I get into this story, and this one is kind of, it drives me a little nuts, but before we get into the story, can you give us a quick history and background on yourself so the listeners know who we're talking to today?
Yeah, of course. I've been a teacher now at West Hill High School for 14 years. When I got there, I was coaching 3 sports, and 9 years ago was named the athletic director. I'm still the girls' basketball coach, and love high school athletics.
Great. Now, apparently you are also a sports dad.
Right, 2 7-year-olds that are learning to get into it right now.
Great. Well, that's terrific. Let me continue with the highlights of this story, and then maybe we can talk about it a bit. Take some calls. Like I said, the phone lines are open. It's 855 Hey Coach. That's 855-439-2622. Okay, so we're getting to this story about Niagara versus Newburgh, and the dilemma here is that Niagara Falls, obviously they can't get a rematch with Newburgh. It's 2 years after the fact. These kids are in college, or as we'll hear later, some of these kids are in college. But here's what Niagara Falls is complaining. They want the 2009 state championship banner stripped from Newburgh High School's, Newburgh Free Academy's gym, and they want it hung in their own gym instead. Now, I'm obviously not holding my breath waiting for this to happen, but apparently Niagara Falls could take their argument all the way up to the New York State Public High School Athletic Association for, I guess, what would be an appeal. Now, Mike, what I got to ask you this before we start. If you were the AD at Niagara Falls, would you be pursuing it to this degree?
To be honest with you, probably not.
Okay.
I don't know what's going to come of this. It's 2 years in the past. The game was played, and, if you lose, you lose. But I would definitely have some sour feelings, there's no doubt about it, if I found out that kids might have been ineligible. And I think the bottom line is, you have a moral or ethical side of this thing, and then you have kind of the letter of the law. And not being an educator in New York, I don't know if those kids are going to be deemed that they were ineligible and wind up having to forfeit the game or not. Then the other part of it is just, our responsibility as educators to try to make sure we're doing the right thing and emphasizing the academic part of the student athlete, not just the athletic part.
Well, yeah, clearly. I mean, this isn't top Division I colleges, and this ain't the pros. I mean, if you're in high school, you got to go to class. I mean, I don't see much. I don't see a whole lot of fuzziness around that one. But I will tell you, one of the Niagara players was quoted in the news, and I personally found it a little strange, if not contradicting. I don't want to use the kid's name. We'll just use his first two initials, CJ. This kid is in college now, and he said, and I quote, "We lost and we moved on, but now it's kind of like, what if? I feel cheated. Newburgh cheated to win. I don't want to sound cocky, but I want that banner where it belongs." This is the part that kind of gets me. I mean, I got my own ideas about this. Let's look at the two issues here. First of all, we lost and we moved on. Well, it sounds like you haven't moved on because you're still harboring some resentment about this, and that's okay. You feel cheated? I got that. They cheated to win? Got that too. I want that banner where it belongs. Really? Question for you guys who are listening, where does that banner belong? Does it belong in Niagara Falls gym? Does it belong in Newburgh's gym? Does it belong in a glass case in the Smithsonian? Does it belong, next to the Lost Ark, in some archive? 855 Hey Coach is the number if you want to shed some light on this for the rest of us. And again, I'm going to reserve my specific feelings on that for just a minute, because at the time the articles came out, the Newburgh Free Academy athletic director, a guy named Chris Townsend, the principal, Peter Coppoletti, and the superintendent of schools, Ralph Pizzo, none of them were returning phone calls. Well, you know what? I guess all you got to do sometimes is drop the name ESPN, and some cool stuff happens. So I decided to try to make some phone calls, and I did indeed get a return phone call from Principal Peter Coppoletti. And I tell you what, for a guy who's seemingly under the gun right now, he couldn't have been nicer. In fact, he was dying. He was dying to give me his personal opinions about this. But, and you can appreciate this, Mike, because of this pending investigation, it was pretty obvious that Peter couldn't really make any significant comment on the situation. He did say, however, that as soon as this investigation is over, he will gladly come on the show to give me his own personal opinions and positions on this whole matter. So I got to tell you what, Peter, I'm going to take a moment here and say thanks to you, Peter Coppoletti, principal at Newburgh Free Academy, and I want you to know, my friend, that I am going to take you up on that offer. So
good for him.
Good. I thought the same thing. Good for him. He wasn't running and hiding. He wasn't saying no comment. He said, Tony, I hope you appreciate there's an actual investigation going on. We got to be respectful of it. And you could tell this guy was biting his tongue. He wants to say something, and I'm going to take you up on that, Peter. So please promise me you're going to do the right thing and then come on the show when you get it done.
And I've been there. There are times where you just cannot comment. And, there may be a whole different side of this that we're not hearing. and he's got to bite his tongue right now.
I hope there's another side to it, because you know what? If something ever seemed so black and white as to a kid admitting, for 2 years I just didn't think it was important to go to class, but I play basketball and we win championships, and that seems to be all that matters in this school. I really hope that ain't the case. Now, Niagara Falls athletic director John Forcucci, on the other hand, was very forthcoming with me. And again, while he certainly can't divulge a whole lot of information during this investigation, he did say that he brought the matter to the attention of the Section 6 executive director, a guy by the name of Tim Slade. Tim, who I could not reach for comment, so Tim, shame on you, guy. Don't hide from this, man. Anyway, Forcucci did say that he would pursue this if there is documentation that Newburgh was at fault. And he said, and I will quote, "We would like to bring the banner back to Niagara Falls." Now, Mike, this is the second time I'm hearing bring it back to Niagara Falls. I'm really hoping somebody can chime in with an opinion, because now I'm the one who's biting my tongue. Somebody's got to have an opinion on this whole idea of bringing the banner back to Niagara Falls, or bringing it where it belongs. You know what? I'm going to ask you. What do you think about this tagline of bringing it back where it belongs? This sense of ownership that Niagara Falls has for this championship banner. What's your thought on that?
Again, I think it's a tough thing. The game was played, and there was a winner and a loser, and I think it's hard not to go with that. But, the way it would be handled in Connecticut would be, that each school is responsible for creating a list of eligible athletes, submitting that to the state, and those are the kids you play with. And if you play a kid who's not eligible, then you have to self-report that and wind up forfeiting those games. Does cutting a class or many classes constitute ineligibility? In Connecticut, it would not. It's basically, are you passing the classes or not? So
really?
Could you cut classes and still pass? Absolutely.
Okay.
But again, that ties into the moral part of this and what you're trying to do as an educator. Are you going to allow these kids to cut all these classes and not do anything about it? I think you're missing.
So if a kid, and by the way, and I'm not going to, well, let's talk about this. There are two things here. There's a rule about passing your classes, and there's GPA minimum requirements and things along those lines, and that's fine. There's probably some overlap, though. I mean, if I just decide never to come to school and I sit home and read my textbook, am I going to be eligible in the state of Connecticut if I pass my class?
I think it would depend on the school. At our school, no. If you miss more than 7 classes on that 8th, you fail for the quarter.
Okay, and there's where I think the fuzz and the rub comes into play is, if you say I cut classes regularly for 2 years, that magic number of 7 or whatever that magic number is, I'd have to assume, and I don't like to, that they probably pass that threshold. Whether or not they pass the class, I don't want to say is irrelevant, but I'm assuming there are some other moving parts there. You know what? We're going to go to a quick break, but when we come back, Mike and I are going to talk about the specifics around not should the game be forfeited or not. Let's assume it's going to be forfeited. What keeps sticking out in my mind is this whole idea, and guys, I want you to call during the break, 855, hey coach, I want to know what happens to that banner. Niagara Falls thinks it belongs in their gym. They'll go so far as to say they want it back, as if it was theirs already. The other kid said, I want it where it belongs. Well, we're going to talk about whether or not it belongs there. But before we go to break, folks, if you or your kids are in need of orthodontic services, then you really ought to call my good friend Dr. Sean Rooney of Rooney Orthodontics in Mayapack, New York. They're reachable at 845-621-1222. I got referred to Sean Rooney from my daughter, Sophia, and I got to tell you, I was indeed blown away. From the second we walked in the door at Rooney Orthodontics, we knew there was something really different about the place. I mean, the first thing you see, video games and television sets. If you're not playing, you're watching instructional stuff about orthodontic treatment, so we were relaxed right off the bat. Technology in the office was amazing. The staff was friendly. They were knowledgeable. And when we sat down for this complimentary consultation of ours, instead of feeling like we were crammed into this cold exam room, we felt more like we were in somebody's living room. The place was huge. It had couches. And when it came time to actually explain the nitty-gritty of what had to be done to my daughter, Sean Rooney literally ignored me, pretended I wasn't in the room. And he talked directly to my daughter. He made sure that she understood everything he was saying, and you could see her tension just disappear. Sean Rooney is also a sports-minded guy, which is great, and it affects his practice because he comes across like a coach. He understands the importance of teamwork in his office, education, preparation, and because of this, my daughter is actually looking forward to her next orthodontist appointment. I challenge you to tell me your kid looks forward to going to the orthodontist. Well, obviously, I'm a big fan of Rooney Orthodontics, so call Sean Rooney today, 845-621-1222, or visit them on the web at RooneyOrtho.com. Friend them on Facebook. Whatever you do, you make sure you tell them Coach Tony sent you.
Coach Tony.
Hey, folks, we're back. You're with Hey Coach Tony this fine Saturday morning, and I am joined in studio today by Mike King, the athletics director at West Hill High School in Stamford, Connecticut. We're talking about this championship basketball game that took place between Newburgh Free Academy and Niagara Falls High School. Apparently, Newburgh has had several former players admit to cutting classes and being, in their own words, ineligible, and now Niagara Falls is clamoring to get this high school championship banner brought to their gym in, quote, where it belongs. Before we get back to Mike, and he and I are going to debate this one for a little bit, I want to get to an email that we got from Kevin, who emailed us all the way from Rockville Center, New York, and he says, hey, Coach Tony, this is clearly an important issue, and it sounds like Newburgh Free Academy cheated, but I really don't like the whining from Niagara Falls High School either. Players need to go to class, period. I think the policy should always be skip class without an absent note from a parent, you don't play. That Niagara Falls State Championship, Newburgh Free Academy State Championship is definitely tainted, and if the allegations can be proven, it should be, and he quotes himself as, vacated. But did Niagara earn the state title? I say no. They were blown out on the court by superior, perhaps ineligible, players. If that banner were given to me under those circumstances, I wouldn't take a speck of pride in it. Thank you, Kevin. Great thought there. You know what? I got to tell you, now the phone lines are starting to ring up a little bit, Mike. So you mind we take a couple of callers and see what they got to say? All right, I tell you what. We got John who's calling in from Long Island. Hey, John, you're on Hey Coach Tony. How you doing this morning?
Good morning, Coach Tony. How are you?
I'm great. All right, so this is, just so you know, Mike, this is a very knowledgeable youth sports guy. He is my brother, John. So while I have a lot of listeners on Long Island, John is too common a name for me to assume that it's him. John, I know this voice, so it's my brother, John. John, good morning. Not good. How my nephews doing?
They're doing great. We got a lot of lacrosse and baseball games today, but I wanted to call in before we started running out the door.
All right, so what do you make of this?
You know what? To me, it's pretty cut and dry. Guess what? If this was found out a week after, a month after, you could replay the game and you could let them settle it on the court. Since it's 2 years later, guess what? Just vacate the title. Say nobody won the championship that year. I guess it's Niagara had a good year. But if you looked at the stats from the games that they played and everything else, the quality of the players on both teams, it wasn't that close. So for Niagara players to be saying, bring the title back where bring the flag back or the banner back, guess what? It wasn't going to happen for Niagara unless, they were missing half the other team players on the other team.
Yeah, well, you know what? Hang on, because that may not be true. We'll never know. One of the kids, and I'll get to this later, one of the kids from Newburgh had the audacity to say, we could have beat them with our bench. Well, guess what? Then you should have.
Correct.
You should have beat them with your bench, but you didn't.
But now, what's worse? The kids on Niagara begging for the flag or the banner to come back home? Or, to me, it's like when we were in Little League and the other team didn't have enough players on the team and they had that little countdown 5 minutes before the game was going to get canceled. Did you really want to win a game that way by, like I said, if it was a week after or a month after, you could probably replay the game and settle it on the court. At this point, I think the best thing to do is to vacate it, say nobody won, and it kind of puts a spotlight on why would nobody win that year. And they can kind of show it as, look, one team had a bunch of players who maybe shouldn't have been on the court. And we're not going to reward them or reward other teams for not winning it on the court. As a player, wouldn't you always want to just win it on the court or win it on the field? I'd rather have, if I was on Niagara, I would rather say, you know what, take it away from them and just let it be. I don't need to be patted on the back 10 years later or 2 years later and say, oh, you should have won or you didn't have a chance. You could have said, you know what, we'll never know. But at this point, let it be open and let it be a lesson for all the other teams that are going to try to do the same thing.
Let's take it a step further. Because you know what? We keep saying that we're not rewarding the athletes. We don't want to reward the athletes for being ineligible, whatever the case is. We did reward them. And I got to tell you this, if you strip that banner down from Newburgh Free Academy, the impact it's going to have on that school and that program and those kids, you want to guess what impact that's going to be, John?
I think it's going to be pretty, you know what? They might not like it.
Now, I guess what? It's going to, John, shut up a second. It's going to be zero. And you know why it's going to be zero? Because let's assume you hand this banner, you fold it up, you iron it, you put it in a glass case, and you hand it to Niagara Falls. What are they going to do? Are they going to have the impromptu celebration with toilet paper and ticker tape in their gym? No. Newburgh got to have that. And I say it all the time. Hang on. It's just like Marion Jones or any of these Olympic athletes who knowingly take steroids and cheat to win. Do they care? That gold medal is a hunk of tin around their neck, and it means nothing more. What means the most to them is they got the ability and the privilege to stand in front of God, country, and world and say, I'm the best, look at me. You can take anything away from Newburgh. Those kids have zero consequence. You really want to do something in Newburgh?
What does it do to Newburgh now? Would it make that a better school saying, guess what, we're not going to tolerate anything like this, and it put the administrators who knew what was going on and did nothing about it, put them in the spotlight. Wouldn't that be something positive for Newburgh?
I totally agree, and that's why I think not only do you strip that banner, I would ban Newburgh, probably, I'd say, I'm going to throw this one out there, 2 years, no postseason. Sorry, guys. You take that much pride in being a basketball school instead of an academic institution? No postseason, 2 years. Wear that for a while. And Pete Copoletti, I want listen, you can't call in today, my friend. I know you're a straight shooter. This is the kind of stuff you and I are going to talk about when this thing finally settles. Because, again, Niagara Falls, here's the banner. Take it. It's toilet paper. It means nothing.
Yeah, I don't. That's very minute problem they're going to deal with. Like I said, I would let nobody win it and say, guess what? It wasn't settled correctly on the court, so nobody won it that year, and let's deal with the consequences that Newburgh has to do. And like I said, I would love to have some of the administrators who knew about what was going on.
Well, let's wait and see if they knew.
Or some of the administrators who knew about it went to somebody, and then those higher-ups did nothing about it. Well, those are the people you got to look for.
There you go. And, John, listen, as always, thanks for calling. Give my nephews my best. And Mike, I want your opinion now as an administrator. Me and John are just a couple of regular guys who bat this stuff around. I just threw some pretty serious suggestions out there. From what I said, what do you think?
I think we got to make sure that, we find out exactly what did happen.
Mm-hmm. That minor detail, yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to start throwing stones without having all the facts. But if indeed these kids did skip just a ton of classes, and that would deem them ineligible, you don't have a choice but to strip them of that banner. What you do with that, I don't think is really too important. You made the case saying that, you guys did something wrong, you played ineligible kids, that banner's gone, that title's gone. And maybe that does send a message. Whether or not you suspend them, like you're saying, from postseason play, that might be a good avenue to take. I guess if I was the team that lost in that case, we had a great year, we did come in second, then I probably would feel that banner should fall onto us. But as you and your brother are saying, it sure wouldn't mean nearly as much as if we beat them on the court, that's for sure.
And again, like I said, as the AD, what do you do? As the basketball coach, what do you do? Someone, UPS brings the banner to your office. I mean, is there this sudden and immediate jubilation of, wow, we did it? No.
Of course not.
I got to say, it's like, getting
on the court, we lost. That's the bottom line.
It's like getting asked to the prom when the guy you want, the guy, I just said the guy, because I think about my daughters all the time. Your date of choice asked someone else and they said no, then they ask you.
Right.
If you have some respect for yourself, say, guy, take it easy.
Yeah, but at the same time, you don't want to take away from what that team did to get there. To get to that game, they had a hell of a season. They have a lot to be proud of.
Absolutely.
It's not like they're passing it on to some second-rate team. They were the second-best team in the state that year. They do deserve a lot of credit for that.
I think they deserve a ton of credit. I'm just wondering, as a player, if there's a high road to take. And it's not that they're taking a low road, but I'm just thinking, just this little, like I said, that one quote, I know you feel cheated, kid. I know they cheated to win. If this is proven true, and I'll keep saying that, but does that banner really, does it mean anything to you? I mean, you can't say we were the best because you'll never know, and it stinks. It sucks that they're never going to know. But if you really think that that's what's going to, be that next big thrust in your life, it's never going to replace, unfortunately, the upside that Newburgh free. If again, this is all under the caveat that they're going to be found that they cheated. If they did, they were rewarded by a celebratory moment as state champions, and no matter what we give to Niagara Falls High School, whether they deserve it or don't, nothing's ever going to replace that. And if the kids think seeing that banner is going to mean something, it's going to be the asterisk that always hung over Roger Maris's home run record. It's never going to mean anything, and that's unfortunate.
I couldn't agree more.
All right. You know what? Before we get back into some of this stuff, and I want to remind you, by the way, Mike King is live in studio with me this week because he was referred to me as a terrific coach, terrific administrator, and so far I got to tell you, he's been a terrific guest. So, Mike, for your contribution to the show and for the work that you do with our kids, you get yourself one of these. We're making a pretty significant habit of this. You get a Hey Coach Tony T-shirt. This superior quality T-shirt that I'm now holding up for the YouTube gang is courtesy of Signature Marketing of Connecticut. Call Jennifer Holguin at 203-232-0868, and she'll help you design the best promotional products for your organization, whether it's a great T-shirt like this one or the terrific Hey Coach Tony coffee mug you see me use all the time, which I can't find. Someone in the studio must have stolen it, or any of a number of different promotional products for your sales meetings, your golf outings, your charity events, anything else you can think of. Jennifer Holguin and her team at Signature Marketing can do it all for you. So call Jennifer at 203-232-0868 or visit them on the web at signaturemarketing.com. I want to say thanks again to Signature Marketing for sponsoring our friend Mike King as our coach, AD, and a great guy of the week. If you want to nominate someone to be on the show, or if you want to be on the show yourself, you know what? Email me and make an argument. You can get me at heycoachtony@gmail.com. You can also call me on the hotline after the show is over at 855-HEY-COACH and make an argument for why you should be on the show. And, hey, we'll have a couple of laughs and we'll do it together. You're listening to Hey Coach Tony on ESPN Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Coach Tony.
Hey, folks, we are back. You are with Hey Coach Tony this wonderful Saturday morning. I am joined in studio this week by Mike King, the athletics director at West Hill High School in Stamford, Connecticut. Mike has been a terrific guest, and as all good administrators and facilitators do, I got my little slap on the wrist during the commercial break, and I'm being reminded by Mike that a lot of stuff you read in the papers just ain't true. And again, I'm hopefully putting enough caveats in there that we're waiting for these allegations to be proven or disproven. But you know what? We're going to go to our public service announcement right now. Mike really had some good thoughts, and rather than do it during the break, I told Mike I wanted him to kind of elaborate a little on this. So, Mike, get to the bottom of this as far as the journalists go.
The number of times I've opened a newspaper or read something online that's out there for everybody to read that I just sat back and, laughed in disbelief, saying, this just is not what happened, or there's a whole other story to this. It's comical, and I don't want to condemn somebody until the facts are truly out there, and, we're going off of an article, and certainly it looks like there's a lot of wrongdoing here, but I just want the listeners to keep that in the back of their mind, because a lot of times I read things in the paper, and, I'm not at liberty to comment on a lot of them, and I'm sure don't have the time to follow up with everybody and say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I've been in a situation where I'd love to comment, and I can't. But, some reporters are a lot more reliable than others, and so are some stories, and you just never really know until all the facts come out. And sometimes, unfortunately, they don't get out in the media.
Well, I will tell you this, and like I said, I happen to love controversy, and I like to stir it up as much as anybody, because let's face it, people like to listen to that kind of stuff. I will tell you, if you or Pete Coppoletti or John Forcucci or any of the folks involved in this particular story bring evidence forth that disproves this, I will crucify, literally if I can, if you give me a hammer and nails, the guy who wrote the articles. Because I think, God loves the truth, and if you twist it just to sell some newspapers or to get people to listen to your radio show, then you're garbage. And I promise you that I will follow up on this story, and we will make sure we get the truth out there, and I will rally to make sure that whatever truth is surfaced, that people are treated accordingly, at least as best I can.
Let me tell you, that show would be very widely listened to and appreciated by a lot of athletic directors and coaches out there.
Hey, I mean, again, all right, so there you go. The gauntlet's out there. If you have written about this story and you're printing a bunch of garbage, Coach Tony is coming to get you. So stay tuned, guys. Tell you what, normally I save the last segment of my show for something I call, let me tell you what really grinds my gears, and I'm starting to enjoy it a lot. I came across this story in Melrose, Massachusetts, and it grinded my gears and continues to grind my gears to the point where I want to dedicate a little more time to it. And again, having an astute academic facilitator on the show who seems to be as level-headed as you are, I want some of your thoughts on this, because you know what really grinds my gears, Mike? Athletes and parents who sign a code of conduct every year but then complain when they are held to it.
Yep.
Sounds as stupid as can be. You're nodding your head because you see it all the time. I read about it all the time, and I try to hold people's feet to the fire. But listen to this. If you didn't hear the story, everybody, in Melrose, Massachusetts, nearly a dozen high school students are facing disciplinary action after photos of them surfaced. These photos were of these kids drinking and or smoking. Now, 11 of these students are athletes, and these athletes have since been suspended from their teams. Some of them will face penalties of up to 60% of their season. That's what the suspension is going to be. Now, of course, the Melrose students, they believe that student athletes are targeted. There's this big conspiracy. They're targeting the athletes, and they believe this penalty is too stiff. Well, again, please keep in mind that these students and their parents each signed a code of conduct. This code of conduct outlines what would happen if and when a student athlete is found to be in the use of alcohol and or tobacco. Keep in mind also the use of alcohol and or tobacco of any American citizen under the age of 18 is against the law. Well, you know what? Before I start losing my mind, Mike, you're kind of nodding your head. You're chomping at the bit.
I'm with you.
Go ahead.
What would you have the school do? I mean, how irresponsible, and what message does it send if they don't enforce the policy they have in place when this proof is given to them? I mean, are the parents claiming that the pictures are inaccurate and that they were doctored? I mean, if this is what happened, it's pretty hard to argue when you have it on video or picture or whatever it is. What would you have the school do? Just ignore it and say, well, these kids are great athletes, we're not going to enforce this policy? I mean, what message is that sending?
And what about this part here that the students believe that student athletes are being targeted? You know what? I get what they're saying. And by the way, good for the administration. I'm a former athlete. You're a former athlete. We all coach kids. I think, and this was said later on in the article, and I'll read bits of it. Being an athlete and representing my school kid, guess what? That is not your right. That is a privilege. It is a privilege that you earn, and that is a privilege that you can pee right down the toilet if you choose to.
And there are responsibilities that go along with it. And you accept those responsibilities when you decide to be a member of a team at your school.
And you accept those responsibilities when you take the pen and sign your name to it and say, I agree to this.
You got it.
If there's something wrong with your code of conduct, and it's that unfair, especially as a parent, take the bone out of your head, stick it in your back, and argue that point before your kid ends up on Facebook doing a beer bong.
Right. Especially, as you mentioned, these are illegal activities, you know.
Am I stupid enough to think kids aren't going to drink and they're not going to smoke? By the way, if you're a kid now and you smoke, you're really stupid. You're a special kind of stupid, because when we were kids and we tried cigarettes, it's because it was an adult thing. Now, they show us pictures of people's aorta clogged with crap. They show a guy, and I almost laughed, and I don't mean to. The commercial with the guy who had to have the tracheotomy, and he can't go swimming anymore because he has a hole in his throat. Guess what? You put that hole in your throat. Yeah. If you see stuff like that and your kid has I would kill one of my kids if I saw him smoke.
The other thing is, when we grew up, everybody didn't have a cell phone with a camera in it.
Well,
you know what I mean? And now, that's something we speak about with our athletes. Anything you do may wind up on Facebook, on Twitter, on this and that, because everybody's taking pictures of everything. And you need to be wise and intelligent as an athlete and think about those things before you put yourself in a bad situation And come on.
You brought up a great point, and it's really a very contemporary bone of contention among athletic directors and coaches. And I'm going to ask you this, and if the answer is no, it's okay, because it's really new stuff.
Yep.
Some ADs and some coaches are putting into place strict guidelines. There's a bin at the entrance to the locker room. When you come into the locker room, your phone goes in there. Because guess what? Kids are kids, and kids are stupid. And they're going to... I make stupid mistakes. My 14-year-old kid, that kid with a camera in his hand, scares me what's going to happen someday.
We all made poor decisions when we were 15, 16 years old.
But there are ADs and coaches who say, when you enter the locker room, your phone is not yours, and you get it back when you leave. Now, of course, kids look at this and say, I should be able to burn my draft card or burn my bra, and you're taking away my freedom, and it's invasion of privacy, blah, blah, blah. Bull crap. The idea is, do you have some policies in place about the use of the electronic devices?
No, we don't, but it's been a very hot topic among athletic directors in our league where, I'll give you an example, we had a situation where a player who was a second-string player, this was not at West Hill, it was another school in our league, their parent came in with pictures from a party of the player of the same position who was the starter.
Oh, my God.
And tried to get that kid in trouble, and you wonder if that's to get their kid put into that starting lineup.
Well, unfortunately...
there's a whole can of worms that's opened up with that, and that's obviously a place that administrators don't want to go, where every time on the weekend, everything a kid does, there's somebody else bringing it to our attention.
But you know what? I got to tell you, Mike, that as much as I respect everything you've said, I got to disagree with you on that one. If I'm the AD... part of me, whether I speak it publicly or not, part of me condones that. Because guess what? If the starting quarterback loses his job and he knows everyone's watching, again, this is illegal activity, so who cares? Nothing illegal was done to get that information. Now, it may be sneaky, you might be a rat, you might be a fink, whatever, but when the day is done, if you're my starting quarterback and I see you, doing a beer bong at a party, you are gone. And if that means the backup quarterback gets his spot, so be it. I'd say it's a necessary evil more than something that's wrong.
Well, there's definitely a positive to that, and that's why you have to be proactive and speak to these athletes about this and say, this is what can happen, this is what is happening around all over the place, and you have to understand that anything you do may get back to us. So there's a pro to it.
Yeah.
But there's also a scope that is just, at some point, becomes so large.
Yep.
That it's almost impossible to deal with all the little things that can come across your desk, and it gets to be just overwhelming and petty.
But again, overwhelming and petty. But I will tell you, it's like I tell everybody else that asks me about these policies around substance abuse. My thought on this is, and it may suck for a year or two, but if your policy is strike one, you're out. Watch the drinking. I don't know if it'll ever stop, but watch that stuff dramatically decline. If there was a law in place that said if you're caught drunk driving, you're going to jail for a year no matter what, I'm telling you, it's going to dramatically drop.
It's going to be that's the way it is.
It's going to be a rough year or two.
But when you're talking about drugs and alcohol, I would agree completely. These are major things we need to address. But it spans so much of a bigger picture. You don't want everybody, every time you're supposed to be in a 25-mile-per-hour speed zone, taking a picture of you going 31.
Well, you know
what I mean?
I do agree with that.
About. When it comes to drugs and alcohol, yes, these are serious issues administrators want to be aware of and want to deal with. But it totally gets much more broad than that.
It does, and I think what will happen there, and we'll talk more about this when we come back from break, I think that'll come down to how guys like you are going to be changing that code of conduct, and it's going to start to get lengthier, but I tell you what, it'll have more teeth. All right, listen, before we go to break, folks, I've been talking about this for 2 weeks, and I'm going to keep talking about it. There is a dear, dear friend of mine, a woman who I cared for deeply. Her name is Lynette Ranacleve. If you've been listening the past couple of weeks, Lynette lost her battle with cancer this past December. Last few years of her life, she was very active in cancer awareness. She participated in the Susan G. Komen for the Cure Foundation, also in this Relay for Life event that is starting to gain popularity. In fact, this year, my own hometown of Somers, New York, and I got to stop saying that because people don't like me on the radio and people show up at my house. But my hometown does do some things right, and they are hosting this year their first and annual Relay for Life event. Now, Lynette Ranacleve's husband is a good buddy of mine. His name is Dan, and he, along with his kids and the young football players that he coaches, have started their own team for this event, and it is in Lynette's honor. The team is called Little Men Representing. That acronym is LMR, which is also the initials of this wonderful woman, Lynette Marie Ranacleve. Now, so far, there's been a tremendous outpouring of support and generosity to the Rannicleve family, and while I am not comfortable asking you to donate money, today I want you to. I insist you go to my website at heycoachtony.com. First thing you're going to see is a pink link at the top of the page where you can go to support the Rannicleve family and their team for this Relay for Life for the American Cancer Society. And again, all I'm asking you is this, and a lot of you are doing it, and I'm very grateful, but I need more of you. Click on the link and just give $1. That's it. $1. You can find more than that in your couch, okay? If you want to give more, that's amazing, but I urge you. This terrific lady, I can't say enough about her. She was a source of inspiration for so many of us in the community. She touched so many lives. Really, please help us find a cure. It's just $1. So again, go to my blog at heycoachtony.com, click on the pink link on the front page and just donate $1 to the American Cancer Society. And please, please honor the memory of this terrific lady who I miss dearly. You're with Hey Coach Tony on ESPN Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Coach Tony.
Okay, folks, you're back. It's Tony Fiorino here. You're listening to Hey Coach Tony on ESPN Radio, and I'm joined in studio by Mike King from West Hill High School in Stamford, Connecticut. Mike and I are just starting to get all worked up about yet one more case of kids getting caught violating a substance abuse policy and then crying boo-hoo when they're actually held accountable for the piece of paper that they signed, and it's driving me nuts. I want to get back to the article a little bit because there were some things here that drove me crazy. The superintendent of schools, a guy by the name of Joe Casey at Melrose, Massachusetts, he did release the following statement. On May 3rd, pictures of student-athletes drinking and or smoking were given to Melrose high school administrators. We've identified 11 students who are in the possession of some type of alcohol or tobacco. Photos have been verified as being recently taken. Following actions have or will be taken. 1, each student and parent or guardian will meet with a member of the high school administration, the athletic director, and the school resource officer. All right, big deal. 2, identified student athletes will be suspended from participation in sports per Melrose policy. Students will lose up to 60% of their season and face other additional penalties. Team captains will face additional penalties, including loss of their leadership positions, rightfully so. All photos have been turned over to the Melrose Police Department to identify houses where these parties took place. And this is the part that I love. You're starting to get to the source of the problem here. These houses will be identified, and the social host law will be strictly enforced. Melrose takes substance abuse very seriously. All student athletes are clearly educated every season regarding the rules and regulations as they pertain to drugs, alcohol, and tobacco. These regulations are enforced in Melrose as in all other communities across the state, blah, blah, blah. All right. The fact of the matter is, the one thing I love is when you start holding the parents accountable. You know,
it's a very appropriate statement by the superintendent. That's exactly what he should be saying.
Appropriately so. And like I said, if they find out that my son TJ had a party and I'm upstairs, watching SportsCenter, and like I said, there's a beer bong contest going downstairs in my kitchen, I am accountable for that.
That's correct.
And I don't know what the penalties are. I hope they are severe, and I hope that the police get involved. Because there were idiot parents who some years ago, you're in Stanford where your school is, Rye is not very far from where you are. You remember the story where the parents thought they were so brilliant, instead of having the kids go drink somewhere else, we'll just have them all drink at our house. You morons, you idiots, what could you be thinking? I mean, so I hope these people are absolutely, just tied to the post when it comes to this stuff. Now again, you would think normal people like you and me would all be applauding the statement, like you are. Guy made the appropriate statement. No. Not a week goes by where a group of parents in this country don't show us all how stupid they are. Get a load of some of the responses that were published in response to this article. Somebody calling himself Ishtar. I hate online stuff. You come up with such stupid names. All right, Ishtar. He gives us this gem of a comment. I'll quote, "My gosh, these same people that are in charge of our schools probably did the same thing when they were in school. I know I did. I partied and I smoked, and I had a heck of a good time. This is a waste of taxpayers' money to go after silly little things like this. Schools should be schools and let the parents be parents." Okay, Ishtar, thank God you didn't use your real name, because I would look you up, I would go to your house, and I would smack you around with a rubber hose, because this is a special kind of stupid. Let the parents be parents. I hope your tongue isn't half like mine. Yes, parents, please be parents and teach your kids that this is illegal activity. I mean, who cares who did it before?
Because this is what drives me and a lot of other administrators crazy. And just there seems to be a shift in society from when you and I grew up, where a phone call comes home from the school saying that your kid screwed up, your parents said you're wrong, and tried to teach you a lesson. And
yeah, you're wrong, meaning the kid. You are wrong, child, yes.
The school's calling home, you did this. They tried to make it an educational moment. They supported the school, and they tried to teach you a lesson and make you a better person because of it.
Mm-hmm.
And now there seems to be a big shift, and what happened sociologically in our society, I don't know, where so many times you call home and the school is wrong, not the child, which is sending such a terrible message to that kid, just trying to get out of the punishment that's being handed down, rather than trying to teach the kid a life lesson. Okay, this is the mistake you made. These are the consequences. This is what's going to happen. Don't make the mistake again.
I always point to...
You're trying to twist it and say, how can we get out of this so that it's not on your resume, it's not on your transcript, or so that you can play, instead of doing the right thing and say, listen, you made a mistake. That's part of growing up. Learn from it. Don't make the same mistake again.
One of my favorite movie lines, and I quote it all the time when it comes to this particular topic, because this idiot Ishtar, and I hope you're listening, you dope, they did the same thing. Well, you know what? You ever see the movie Breakfast Club? It was pretty popular when we were kids.
Movie,
okay. My favorite part in that movie, and it was positioned as the father was a jerk, but the father was 100% on the mark when he dropped Anthony Michael Hall's character off. Emilio Estevez's character off, the jock.
Yep.
What'd he say? Hey, everybody screws around. You got caught. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. And we as kids like, boy, that parent, what a jerk. No, that parent, dead on the mark. And the problem...
He understood.
He got it and summarized it in a sentence. Here's the problem socioeconomically that's happening that you alluded to. I figured it out. So everybody, turn up your radios and pay attention. Parents now are more interested in being their kid's friend than being their parent. They want to be their fan in the stands than their parent. And that's where you're all screwing up massively. A guy named David, at least use his first name, quote, how did our society turn into such a Nazi state? And that's the word, Nazi state. What these kids did is none of the school's business. The low-life dirtbag that turned them in should be arrested for invasion of privacy. We have become a nation of spies and rats. David A., I can allude to what the A stands for, but I don't think I can say it on the radio. All right? So David A., I hope you're listening. You could be the dumbest person who's ever lived. Nazi state. These kids, what they did is none of the school's business. Again, you're wearing a jersey that has got my school's name on it. You better believe everything you do is part of my business. I mean, do you disagree with that?
No, and I think you bring up a great point, and we talk about it all the time at our school. You are representing West Hill. It says West Hill across your chest. You are out there. And that's a big thing with athletics. Whether it's right or wrong, athletics is in the paper 6 days a week for 10 months at the high school level. The academic stuff, SAT scores are reported once or twice. Maybe that's wrong, and we should have more emphasis on the academic part. But the reality is that the athletes are in the paper all the time. Their results, what they're doing on and off the field or court or whatever the playing surface is out there, and that's the image that people outside of your community have of your school. And it goes back to the first story we were talking about. You have two school systems that we're talking about. One that, in theory, according to the newspaper article, may have cheated and played ineligible people. Our image of that school system is what we're talking about right now, right or wrong.
Exactly, and they could be squeaky clean, and we spent a half hour talking about what happens if they're wrong. Now, by the way, David A., because like I said, I could do another hour on this. ESPN, if you're listening, if you can open up the lines for another hour, I'll do it, all right? Free of charge. Coach Tony, 2 hours today. It ain't happening. The next idiot that talks about invasion of privacy when it comes to things like Facebook and Twitter, there should be a new law where we should just take those people and just put them on an island where they can just, and by the way, they should all be neutered so they can't reproduce because there's stupidity, and stupidity is hereditary. Just ask my kids. But that is not an invasion of privacy. These kids thrive on the public eye, and they can't wait to get themselves out there. Taking a picture is not illegal. Not in a public place like a party. So idiots, if you're listening, don't do illegal things. Don't put everything you do on Facebook. I just did a whole bit on Rashard Mendenhall, decided to be a moron on Twitter and talk about, conspiracy theories and apparently how we should all learn to love Osama bin Laden. You're a special kind of stupid, and guess what? You put it out there for the whole world to see. So you notice at least Rashad Mendenhall is smart enough not to be complaining that he's catching all this heat about the statements he made.
Yep.
These idiots, and some of them position themselves as adults. I know there are kids that are chiming up on this. The penalty isn't severe enough. And again, you signed to it.
Again, there is a lesson learned here, and this is where coaches and administrators and parents need to really be proactive and talk to their kids about this stuff and say, listen, don't put yourself into a compromising position where you may wind up having some what should be dire consequences.
And in most cases, there are dire consequences. And would I want to see my son lose 60%? Oh, one kid, well, I got to get to this idiot. All right, you know what? I'm not going to find the actual quote, but they said, gee, great job. What if a scout is coming that day to watch that kid? Well, guess what? Yeah, what if a scout is... The idiot who is drinking and smoking should be thinking of that. The parents of that kid should be thinking of that, not how do I get my kid off. Hey, sporto, you want to throw your entire high school career down the toilet and waste your shot that one guy from Northwestern is going to come watch you play, and that's the day that you're suspended for substance abuse? Are you stupid?
And I and many coaches out there promote that athletics are teaching life skills, and that's what we're trying to promote. Well, these are life skills. These are life lessons learned through athletics that, hopefully stick with these kids and they learn from and make them better human beings as they get older.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? I guess ESPN didn't take me up on the extra hour. Hey, Mike King from West Hill High School, awesome job, man. So great to have you in studio today. Another quick hour of my life gone by, folks. But you know what? Every week I'll keep doing it. I want to thank you for the emails. I want to thank you for the phone calls. And I want to thank you for nominating your athletic directors and your coaches and your kids for recognition on the show. This is the thing I love to do, folks. Make sure you tune in every week for Hey Coach Tony, Saturdays at 9. We'll see you next week.